We're going to start with a very short presentation up front, which is how AI is impacting product, right? So here we're going to be talking about the different constraints, the new constraints and new opportunities that AI is enabling for products. And then we will have the main event, which is our fireside chat with Mr. Ren Sen Ho, who I will introduce later. He's a AI product manager at GovTech. And then later on, we'll do the audience Q&A. So let me start by flashing this image, okay? This is a scene that we often see in the malls these days, right? What is this? This is like a gacha, it's called a gacha machine, right? So what it is, it's like you put the money in, you get a capsule out, and when you open the capsule, it's a surprise. You can either get an ordinary toy or maybe a limited edition Labubu. Okay, so that is, what does that have to do with AI products, right? This kind of surprising dynamic that comes out. It operates by the same dynamic, which is that AI responses are what we call high variance, right? Which means that whenever you put something into the AI, you can get a mediocre response, or it can surprise you with a great response. So this is what we also call in product as variable reward mechanics, because you never know, right? You always get to wonder, hey, I wonder what ChatGPT will say about this. When I enter this into the text box, will it give me the good response or not? And then this also creates what we call a more addictive dynamic, right? Because it gets users hooked. You don't know what you want, so you keep putting the prompts in. Okay, so we call this phenomenon like gotcha GPT. And what underlies this, right? It looks like, all right, what does this have to do with AI? But in reality, it underscores a very important attribute of AI systems, which is that they are what we call probabilistic systems. Okay, probabilistic meaning there's always a level of uncertainty there, right? And that makes it different from classical software, which is more like a classical vending machine. You input $2, you get a Coke can out, right? But for AI, sometimes you get a very surprising response out. Okay, so we can see this as a drawback or as a flaw, but we can also see this as an opportunity, right? Because what happens now is that we as users are unclear about what the edges, what are the capability edges, what can it do, what it cannot do. Which means that there's an opportunity for an app layer on top of it to kind of set those edges. And that results in new types of products to emerge. So another image I want to show you here. Okay, what does Pokemon have to do with AI products? Well, recently there was a test that Anthropic did, right? So when they launched their newest model at that time, they tried to make it play Pokemon. And guess what? It struggled immensely, right? So I think it took like 3 months just to get to the third gym to get the badge, right? So that is definitely way behind, even the kids, right? The human players who are out there. So that creates some kind of paradox for AI, right? Because on the one hand, AI can write you essays, code, it can write your research papers, so it can do all these very intellectual tasks. And yet it fails to beat a game that most kids, even me when I was 10, I completed this game. So there is this kind of paradox on hand, right? And right now, these systems are what we call, in some areas, smarter than PhDs, but in many other areas, it's still less capable than a child, right? And there's actually a technical phenomenon related to this called the Moravec's paradox, right? And there's a lot of papers that are written on this. It's also what we call jagged or spiky intelligence, because it's spiky in some areas, but it falls flat in other areas, right? So there are extensive papers that are trying to research why this is the case. Why is it that AI intelligence is so jagged at the moment? Okay? So when these researchers kind of looked into the details, they found that in general, the AI still struggles with a lot of what we call the long duration and tasks that are kind of outside of their training distributions. Okay, so they still struggle with them, and therefore, it makes it very puzzling. How do we work with this kind of intelligence, right? How do we work with somebody who's potentially smarter than a PhD, but also less capable than a child, right? It's something quite new for us to kind of experience, and it also sometimes gives us a false sense of confidence. Okay, because the AI can deliver like very complex research papers, of course it should be able to do the simpler tasks. But then you get surprised that the simple task that you assign to it, it actually fails. Okay, so how do we navigate this kind of trend, right? And what use cases, what early use cases does this kind of paradox enable? Okay, so now we talk about use cases. I'll show you this graph here. This is a usage graph of OpenAI ChatGPT, right? What happened on the 6th of June? You see that the usage was like this and then it just dropped. Any guesses what happened? No, it's not ChatGPT 5 that launched. GPT-5 just launched in, I think, more recently, right? So, but why is there a drop off overall? Not DeepSeek. It was because exam season was over and the students went on vacation, right? So that shows that this chart is very indicative that most AI usage these days are still about completing schoolwork, right? That's the main use case right now, to be honest, right? So AI already excels at what we call low stakes and one-off tasks, okay? But I think you also heard about this report, right? In terms of enterprise applications, 95% of the pilots at companies are failing. And when they diagnosed the issue, they found that, hey, it's because AI is still too brittle for enterprise applications. It doesn't adapt well with the current workflows. And even more importantly, the AI doesn't have very good long-term context retention, meaning it doesn't do what we call continual learning, right, over long durations. Continual learning over long durations is still a bottleneck for us to reach what we call the agentic promise for AI, right? For us to actually be able to assign tasks and just leave it be. Okay, so if this dynamic, you can see that reflected here as well, right? You can see that AI is already very good at the short duration tasks, right? Answering questions, counting words in a passage, finding facts. But when it comes to tasks that require multiple steps and a lot of context switching, AI is still very much limited on those use cases, right? So I think we set the expectation that AI can already do a lot, right? So we get very impatient. Hey, it can write my research paper. Of course, it should be able to do this, right? But in fact, we tend to overestimate what the new technology can do in 1 year. And yet, we also neglect the larger promise at the end, right? So we underestimate what they can do in 10. Back to the present, right? The other constraint or the issue that's facing AI systems and integrating them into products is what we call the unit economics question, right? What does unit economics mean? It means, are you able to make the delivery of a service or a product sustainable, right, in terms of the cost? So this is a funny example where a startup says, oh, we are now generating $100 million in revenue. But when you look under the hood, their Anthropic bill, or what they pay to the foundational model, is $120 million, right? So there is a gap here in between. And so gross margins are seen to drop as AI gets integrated, right? Another news that came out was Notion, where they say, oh, we used to have gross margin of 80%. Now it's down to 70% because we had to spend on all the token costs, right? So the higher the usage, the higher the cost. That makes it, again, very different from traditional software, where it's about you build once, you deploy everywhere, and with minimal cost. But for AI, when you deploy it and it gets used, your costs also go up along the way, right? So now there's a question that's prevailing, right? Whether this whole dynamic leads to kind of a pyramid that will kind of, or like a house of cards that will come crashing down, right? So if we look at this, we can see that, yes, on the model providers, it's already very competitive. So it's becoming a bloodbath in terms of their competition in between, right? And that goes, the same dynamic goes for what we call the wrappers, right? Which are just applications that basically repackage the underlying models, right? So these people, yes, it's becoming a bloodbath for them. But who is benefiting from this competition and this dynamic? Who's benefiting? Any of you bought NVIDIA stock? Right? So in the gold rush, it's the miners. It's the people who provide the shovels, right? So chips and data centers, they are benefiting a lot from this. Who else is benefiting? Of course, are the people on top, right? The users and the builders. Because this competition leads to what we call consumer surplus. It leads to, all right, because the costs are now dropping, it gives a lot of opportunities for the users and the builders to do more with these models. So now we get to how we can make the most of this AI technologies and how we integrate into products, right? So this is a misleading expectation, right? We think that AI can just do things end to end. We can just drop and throw a task to AI, and they can do things from 0 to 1 all the way to the release. But where AI actually adds value, at least based on all those constraints that we mentioned, right, is not the end to end, but more what we call the middle to middle. Middle to middle, right? So that took a while for me to internalize, right? What does it mean that instead of end to end, it's middle to middle? But when I use AI myself, I realize that this is a smart way to use AI, which is I start by working hard on the first draft, make sure that I give a good prompt, so I carry the 0 to 1, and then I let AI poke holes and substantiate whatever that is at the start. And then at the end, I still have to verify and make sure that I judge the quality correctly, right? I make sure that everything is based according to my expectations. So this is probably how we will be making the most of AI. We will continue to make the most of AI like this, right? It's not that AI, we just expect it to do things end to end, but it already excels at not the 0 to 1 and not the finishing touches, but more the middle to middle dynamic. Okay? So that leads us to the question, right? When we build AI products, when we use when we try to make the most of them, do we have to wait for more model breakthroughs? Right? We can say, all right, maybe the next GPT version can solve that. But I think if you observe the release of GPT-5, there's already some evidence that points to a plateauing of the actual model capabilities, right? But what that means is if the model capabilities plateau, the ground that we build on is now a bit more stable, which means it creates a lot of opportunities for people who are building products, right? And changing our workflows, right? And there's even this concept called the product capability overhang, which says that even if all model development already stopped today, we would still have enough catching up to do of further improvements via what we call this product capability overhang. So there's a lot of new product opportunities that we can tap into. All right, so I think now is a good time for us to transition to the fireside chat, right? Because we will hear from somebody who is at the front lines of building these products and trying to see how they can integrate these AI systems into their workflows. Okay, so the topic is really more about changing what we build and how we build. Okay, and with that, I will welcome our guest speaker from GovTech, Mr. Ho Ren Sen. Please help me welcome him as well. Right, so just to give a brief intro of Ren Sen, right? So he's AI product manager at GovTech right now. So there's a lot that I think we can definitely look forward to learning from his experiences and his insights. Interestingly, he's also an alumnus here at NUS-ISS. He took one of our programs on designing and managing products and platforms before. And that's why it caught my attention at that time, right? Because I used to work on chatbots, and he was also working on chatbots even before it was popular, right? That was the pre-Chat GPT phase. So I think he will share some of those experiences with us as well. All right, so let's get to our chat. Okay, maybe we don't need this. Okay, so welcome, Ren Sen, to our session here.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why don't we start with a question about your role, right? So your role now is AI product manager at GovTech. I also used to be a product manager, so I'm wondering, like, what is the difference in terms of the typical product manager and AI product manager, and how did you get there?
Okay, I think this question is very interesting. I probably just want to do a quick sentiment check in the audience here, if you don't mind. How many of you here are current PMs? Okay, from those who raised their hands, how many of you are AI PMs? Whether just Gen AI PMs or just AI PMs? Oh, there's one over here. Because you know what, typically PMs spend more time with the customers and stakeholders rather than in the building and the audience. So that's one thing that's true, whether you're an AI PM or PM, that is the role that most good PMs would know, right? They own the vision, the strategy, the roadmap planning, and so on. But what really makes the difference between AI and PM, AI PM and a traditional PM, is where you go deep into the weeds of understanding the technical components, because this can really shape the way you, for example, change the order of your backlog items. And what I mean by backlog items are that these are the list of features or list of things that you want to release to your users or your customers, and how this understanding of the technical components can influence is due to your assessment of feasibility of things, right? I think maybe with certain prompts to this model here, then I can reveal more examples to you, right? So what I mean by all these technical components, right? It could be, for example, system prompts or model selections, model evaluations, even considering whether you should do something even though the model can do it. So there are a lot of these considerations that are very new because you're dealing with systems that are probabilistic, as you mentioned, versus traditional PMs who deal with deterministic functions, meaning I have a user story, I have a feature, I want it to work in this way, behave in this way, pass certain acceptance criteria, and get the product out to the users. But right now, this product is a living being. It has its own mind. If I can try to anthropomorphize it, right? It has its own way of behaving, and therefore, this work becomes challenging. There are a lot of you open up quite a lot of different considerations from here because of probabilistic systems. So that's what makes the difference between AI PM and the PM.
All right. So I think you mentioned a few interesting points there, right? So for example, am I right to understand that product managers now have to learn a bit more on the technical side to understand what those AI systems are capable of, the constraints, and not just beyond owning the vision, the roadmap, beyond the usual generalist skills that you need in product. Now, in addition, you need to have those technical capabilities and skills in place.
Yeah, that's right. I've noticed, like in several moments of my product management process, I can just give one example, right? This is an encounter I remember through this working level experience where I have a certain goal for this AI assistant. Now we call it AI agents because it has hands rather than just a brains. But that time there were AI assistants. We wanted to produce certain outputs, certain answers, and and the work of getting the outcome you want, getting the output you want is through different techniques, for example, models, system instructions, your context and other information you can bring into the context window. So there are a lot of permutations from there. And one of the work, right, for engineers, because I work with engineers a lot, I mean, this is a typical PM, you work with engineers too. Usually, they write code, they check in code. Does the PM get involved in this? No, right? Usually, it's always the engineers among themselves reviewing the code. But I still remember this day where, for the first time, they check in prompts into the code base. And there were a lot of discussions, healthy discussions, not like those kind of ugly debates, right? Healthy discussions among themselves. And no one can really understood if this is the right code because this is English. So what happens? How do you unchain this, right? So I also have to go down and review the code which is written in English because I need to assess whether it aligns to two things as what normally PM always try to do, whether this this prompt aligns with the user goals and also with the business outcomes or the agency outcomes in the context of government. So then because you're trying to get the AI agent to behave like how any other PM or any other human being will behave, it needs to able to align. So how do you tell if this is the right one? You have to go in and open up the code base and take a look. So this is one activity I realized is very different for an AI PM, right, versus a traditional PM. One more example. Last time we always talk about hallucinations and guardrails and all this. We are trying to be responsible, right? At least we are trying to ensure that the outputs are not just safe but aligned. Where the earlier models were quite not the latest models as we see today are more advanced and much more protected than the earlier models. So when I first started using GPT-3, for example, I have to work quite a number of different interns. And I was very excited about this task, and they were very excited too, because I got a few of them with the darkest minds I can imagine, okay? Why we want that? Because we want to do model training. And of course, as testers ourselves, as engineers, we also do test-driven development. Yeah, for sure, we can always ask all sorts of nice questions, right? How to register something, when are opening hours, and so on. What if you go and ask how to kill somebody, right? And some other questions. So we have various dark categories, right? Yeah. So we have all those questions, right, that you won't want to see. And if you share this test set around with other colleagues, they may get offended. So we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I can count it to almost 1,000 plus different questions. Those were the inputs, right? And the outputs, well, we can manipulate it, right? It doesn't have to answer truthfully how to kill somebody in 2 or 3 different ways, right? Yeah, you can pretend to not know what you're talking about and say that, I can help you A, B, or C. What can I help you with? Is it A? Then you can show 3 example questions of how you might want to respond to the agent. So, lesson from here is that you wouldn't know this kind of considerations until you really start to experiment it and dig into the darkest corners. And that's where you see that, okay, we are not just talking about happy case and sad cases, we are talking about the edgy cases here. So there's really a lot of, is this job I can say is really exciting, but yet can also be very tough, very good for people who like thrill seekers. Yeah.
So if I were to pull together what you mentioned for the audience, right? I think you mentioned 3 things there. One is the PM, the AI PM now has to understand the technical, more the technical underpinnings of how the system works, because a lot of code has now become prompt, right? So we need to make sure that that's aligned to the user goals. Second, it's about making sure that you also understand the guardrails, the ethical guardrails, how it aligns back to the use case and the business. And I think the third one that you may have also inferred is when we build deterministic products, we can just do it from top down. But now with AI, it's kind of like dealing with an organism, which is emergent, right? Which is that you are kind of trying to discover what it's capable of doing, right? With what you said, your interns with the dark minds, and they have to go into the dark corners, and you kind of discover from an emergent point of view what the AI or the product is able to do, right? So I think those are goes back to what I said earlier about trying to set the edges to the product itself, which is interesting, right? Maybe to give the audience also an idea of what you're working on, right? At GovTech, I prepared this. There's a screenshot here, right? So just to show you what Ren Sen is actually working on at GovTech, right? So I'm sure a lot of you have interacted with the government services chatbots. So he's the guy here. If you have any feedback, right? Why I wanted to show this is because I want to tie back what you said, right? Like how AI is changing PM work to your work here with the chatbots and you know what you're working on currently. What are the challenges that you face? Any kind of thrilling stories that you want to share with the audience?
Okay, I better start with the introduction. That was a very
By the way,
broad.
anybody who wants to ask questions, you can scan the QR code. You can post, and we can post it. All right, sorry. Yep.
Okay, no worries. I think, well, that's a very broad question, but yeah, let me just provide some context, right? Like every model needs context. So, I've been working on Vika, which is called Virtual Intelligent Chat Assistant, and most people in the public wouldn't know about this because there's a skin and there's a brand on top of this Vika. So most of you will know these little chatbots on the bottom right corner. In most of the government agency websites, I'll just say most because there are a few more that are coming out along the way. And it's just there to answer answer queries 24/7, but also to reduce the operational overheads of each of these agencies. So in any typical month, there is close to 500,000 to 1 million queries, all sorts of queries, right? And these are very interesting ones because we can see some of the interesting and darkest queries also from time to time. Yeah. So I became an AI PM, and that's a funny part I want to probably can share. I started out as a software engineer with a huge edge and interest in AI. And then one day I decided to take up on this, I want to crack on this challenge, the interaction with citizens with AI challenge as a PM. I was actually experimenting with earlier models already, Tesh-Tavishi 002 at that point of time with a few engineers. And that was even way before ChatGPT, right? Suddenly, when ChatGPT came out in November 2022, automatically, right after that Christmas, I became an AIPM, right? That was even before anyone knew what AIPM is, or nobody even heard about this term before. So I'm also like discovering what the definition of AIPM is at that point of time. Till now, I think there's a more refined definition for some of you who are in the AIPM role these days. Yeah. So, so when AI boom, when Gen AI boom, we have a lot of hard realities to deal with. There are a lot of challenges. Everybody within the government and outside the government, and even within the agency itself, all sorts of agencies, all says they want Gen AI, right? So what happens? From there, I grow a lot of white hair. Then I put on black hair. No, not just kidding. I have a lot of rising expectations, but also missed expectations, and people are just trying to get that magic quickly, right? Agencies want it because the hypothesis is that this will reduce a lot of knowledge or rather content authoring work. Part of the magic behind all those chatbots that you see requires a substantial knowledge base, right? You get an output based on the input. The pre-LLM era works by having a bucket of answers. So if you have 100 answers, there's only 100 answers that the chatbot can pick from, right? And the challenge from that is you have so many different permutations of questions, but the chatbot can only select from this set of 100 or set of 200. And that creates a lot of limitations. This is why agencies want the the Gen AI ability, not because they think the tech is cool, but because for them, it reduces a lot of the day-to-day knowledge authoring work, right? They don't have to create answers, and today they don't even need to create quite a lot of content themselves. They just plug in the web and other knowledge sources to answer questions. So reduce content authoring work, that is the desire they have. But the pain they have is they feel like it's always going off tracks. The chatbot is going off tracks. So at the same time, they also want to have control back from the AI. They want Gen AI, yet they don't want Gen AI. Then how do you deal with this reality, right? And then you have all these expectations from various stakeholders. Yeah, so how do you deal with that? I think so this is where the PM comes in, the traditional PM process comes in handy, because you still need to get out of the building and go to agency from one HQ to another HQ to another HQ. Vika has close to 70 different agencies. There are a lot of chatbots on there. And you really learn a lot by going to each of their meetings, right? Their office buildings, one after the other. And then you get a real deep insight that most reports cannot give you. So you develop a strong intuition from there, what they actually mean by they want Gen AI, don't want Gen AI, right? So, which, cut long story short, it led me to this, what I call a hybrid AI strategy, after learning all the pains and what we mean by one and don't want Gen AI. I call it hybrid AI strategy, which is what is known as the Vika 2 strategy today, right? I mean, we're going to Vika 3 also with a newer strategy, but the latest one being hybrid AI, meaning at a high level, we are providing them three things: to ground, to steer, and to override Gen AI. We need to improve our platform, and by extension, giving the ability or capabilities to the agencies to ground, steer, and override Gen AI. And the interesting piece here, I would like to call this, I would like to point out, is the overrides. Right? Because we all know RAG, that's grounding. You have system instructions today to steer so that it acts in a certain role or personality that it wants. But today, I also realized that there's a lot of content out there that, especially high-stakes content, for example, in the legal domain, or in the elections area, or other high-stakes area, they cannot afford any words to be paraphrased because it can mean something else. Even a change in the grammatical structure can mean something else, right? So there is a set of vocabulary they want to use. And no matter what you go, how you steer or how you try to do all these Gen AI techniques, it still can't produce the exact wording they want. That's why I introduced this thing called overrides. And therefore, I realized that not everything must be Gen AI. I introduced Gen AI plus NLP, old school AI technology that still works. And so the NLP stacks on top of the Gen AI. And how it works is that there is always a check if there is a need to dig out answers from the knowledge base, first and foremost, with a degree of confidence first, right? So at least we are giving the chance for the agency to use their own content, should they wish that they feel that it's worth the extra effort to write and author their own content with multiple levels of approval within the agency and just get it out to the chatbot, right? Or they feel like, okay, this is not high stakes domain. This is something I'm okay to let AI fly on its own and generate words on its own, right? With a certain threshold, with a certain degree of accuracy that I can accept. So this is where we land on to call hybrid AI. I mean, whatever terms you want to use is fine, but I realized that it's good to combine Gen and non-Gen AI versions. This is my biggest intuition from learning so many agencies today.
I think you speak to one interesting workaround, right? So we established that generative AI is probabilistic, which has its advantages, but it also means that not everything is within your control. So what you're doing is very interesting because you try to bring the best of both worlds with the hybrid AI that you mentioned, right? How do we get the best of probabilistic, meaning it can understand unstructured intent, but also provide relatively grounded, anchored, and structured responses through the more old school AI tool and technique, right? So that leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is, given that you've faced all these challenges navigating how to bring AI into the public sector, were there any sort of ways that you thought AI has improved your workflow or your process or changed your process? In terms of maybe something that made you go, wow, that was really cool that you want to share with the audience as well?
So it's rather interesting because I'm also exploring how I'm reinventing my own work. And I think for some of the PMs in this room, uh, you will also question whether you could accelerate your own workflows, right? Am I right to say these are PM workflows, right?
Yes, PM workflows.
Maybe I'll just throw some examples as a way to explain this, right? One of the most recent ways I reinvented myself was in the area of product research for the purpose of doing product strategies. And I found this workflow to be very interesting. Okay, typically in any moment, in any week one, right, my inbox is exploding with so many AI news, right? And I also set up with various listening posts. So there are newsletters, podcasts, YouTube videos, TikToks, and all sorts of things for me to understand what is ahead and what to look out for. But I can never always keep up. We have all our obligations and responsibilities in life. So how do you keep up with this? And formulate relevant strategies to improve your platform or the product and make sure that it's relevant to your customers, right? One of the ways I do is to use Notebook LM. I found this very interesting technique where I used to be not able to read. I used to be not be able to understand scientific papers. Those very capable ones, they publish things in Arvix archives. Um, then there are also some interesting corners around the web. There are quite a lot of interesting PDFs. And if you like, oh, you see like 100-page PDF, you have no time to read. You have so many things to do in a typical day already, and your phone is flooding with so many WhatsApp messages already. So how do you keep up, right? I just throw in the PDF, and it generates a 7 to 10-minute video presentation to me, right? And that's how I also keep up with the latest news, like the 95% thing, the gap between what's actually having value and what is no value. So that's one way for me to keep up with things and also be able to read and understand PDFs or articles that I used to not be able to understand. And this really is a new area. This is something that couldn't be done before if there's no such technology, and really helps PMs a lot. So that's one example for one area of the PM workflow process. One other thing I can bring, for example, a bit more tactical for some of you who likes the tactical portion. As PMs, we always write a lot of tickets, right? We try to be efficient in this area because we have other important things we need to do when we meet agencies and stakeholders. So can you always get your user stories and your AC's acceptance criteria right all the time? That's why you do quite a lot of backlog refinements, right? But I have this extension called Reforge, Reforge. Reforge. It's a very interesting extension where you can install in the browser. It opens on the right-hand side of the Jira panel. And it acts as my collaborator, my fellow collaborator, AI collaborator. It prompts me edge questions, edge cases, or even ask challenge whether this thing that I wrote has any value at all or not. So it really gave me like not the final answer, but it helps me improve my clarity in my thinking. So there are a lot of these things around that really helps you as a PM. Yeah, so I think it is an interesting time to discover how you can reinvent yourself from time to time.
What I like about the examples that you shared was that it's not only actually applicable for PM. It's applicable for anybody who's doing knowledge work about how do you synthesize large amounts of data with multiple sources. So you set up those listening posts that help you summarize. And the other thing is, how does AI act as a collaborator, right? Like to the point that I highlighted earlier about the middle to middle, it's not so much about the AI doing all the work, but it's about the AI poking holes into maybe the initial user stories that you have done, and then being able to sort of give you the edge cases and see, hey, what else have you not considered, for example, right? And so instead of offloading everything to it, it's helping you kind of level up because it covers all the edge cases that you may not have foreseen at the start, right? So I think it's useful to think about the workflow changes, right? But I want to kind of direct us now to the future of this role, right? The future of product management, right? When we look at um, the product role itself, right? Like you said, you still have the foundations there, which is you need to understand what is the right user problem to solve. How do you set the roadmap, the vision? Then you deliver the product, and then you drive the adoption. So within this, is there anything that you think will change based on all these new AI tools, right? And what I mean by this is when, for example, Andrew Ng, right? He actually shared that there will be actually more demand for product managers. Why? Because coding tools have now made it a lot easier and faster for engineers to deploy code out there, which means that product management is now the bottleneck, which means we actually need to get more of them for us to ship products faster, right? So how do you think about that? Like maybe your take on the future of the role, what parts of the role will be impacted, what has to evolve?
Yeah, very interesting question. Because of the nature of fluid intelligence, it really breaks down the communication barrier a lot and the workflow barriers a lot, right? I always like to refer AI as fluid intelligence because it has a lot of general intelligence. What I find interesting is that um, now the engineers that I work with, and as far as some other engineers that I know in my network, they sort of like have realized that one day they may abstract quite a lot of this like tedious and grunt work. For some of these, like a lot of boilerplate work, to the point where they find themselves thinking almost like the manager of AI. Whether that's good or bad, it depends on how you use it and whether you intentionally want to automate your brain away or not, right? So really, it depends on how you want to use it. But where I see the trend is going into, right, in terms of the knowledge work, is that because as engineers write more and more prompts, they are either encouraged or cornered to think almost like a PM, right? So that's one osmosis I'm looking at. On the other hand, the PM also need to understand the language of the engineer as well, especially dealing with AI and a lot of probabilistic systems. And therefore, you also, from time to time, need to do a lot of experimentation, because I feel that experimentation and getting a hands-on is the best way to understand opportunities and limitations of your AI techniques, right? Anything from most recent things like MCP servers, or even the earliest things like prompt engineering, or even in the middle of things like context engineering. So we can see there's an osmosis from both sides of the field, even not just engineers and PMs, but also product designers, because they used to do a lot of UI, and also if they are very good PDs, right, product designers, they also focus a lot on UX.
Yep.
And interaction design, or ISD, right, is also part of UX. Is a field, a very important field to understand on how to engage with users with the use of AI. Then you see, right, actually the work by the engineers, by the PMs, and the UX designers, yeah, they one day will actually merge. I feel that it will merge. My prediction may be wrong, but there's a healthy consideration of each other's roles and what they're thinking about in order to make an AI product to be successful, right? I'm pretty sure some of us read that next time in future, once the roles sort of merge together, it may have a different name, which I do not know what that name might be. Maybe we call it orchestrator, maybe we call ourselves a system designer, but whatever that is, whatever the name of the role is, the PM function in especially AI PM will become relevant. Is relevant in 2025 and onwards will become much more relevant, and it's something that we have to take note of and pay attention to, because we are going to deal with more AI products in the future. So we need to understand not just how it works, but also it's like the keys in the piano, how we want to orchestrate it and play the song that we want.
I think what you said has a lot of interesting implications, right? What I heard basically is that the product managers have to become more like engineers and designers. The engineers and designers have to learn more about the PM skills, right? And in terms of design here, we're not just talking about the UI design, how big the chat boxes are, but even more importantly is how you design the interactions. Like it's almost like designing a personality or the behavior of the chat interface itself, which brings in new considerations for the product as well, right? Yep.
The yeah, for about interaction, right? So I feel that interaction is the underrated thing in AI. We always talk about we need better models and better code. I feel that the underrated thing is interaction design or UX. AI needs UX. That's what I'm saying, right? What I mean by this, you need better prompts. You need better system instructions to guide the AI to behave in a certain way. And this is basically not a new idea. I'm not saying that writing prompts is not a new idea. This is just a easier and much more intuitive way for builders today to get AI working the way they want. Because before LLMs, right, we also have to pay attention to designing or engineering the interaction, just not without prompts, but through, some of you might know this, through NLP systems, we have technical building blocks like intents, entities, and contexts. And those days, if you are dealing with those products, everyone are not just an engineer. Engineers, PMs, and even designers have to understand this common language in order to design a chat flow or a dialogue with the user so that it works. And it's incredibly difficult, incredibly hard, right? Because it's so abstract and so invisible to many people that they just see the shell only, but they don't know the work behind. Now, this shell is not so hard to understand because it's a text box, it's in English, and you can prompt any way you want it.
Yep. All right. I think we are running out of time, so we have space for maybe one or two questions from the audience. Anybody who wants to share? I'm also looking at what we have here on our Slido. But maybe I'll open it up to the live audience first. Yes, over there. I'll give you the mic. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
My name is Gayatri, and I'm doing my MTech in Enterprise Business Analytics here. I'm a current full-time student. I am actually working on a product of my own that aims to, aid in the mental health care sector. My burning question is how I can make an effective or an efficient use of AI in my product. I know AI cannot replace therapists as such, and also I don't want to disclose my idea right now, but I just want to have a general idea, and it's a perfect opportunity for me because you're a PM yourself. Thank you.
So how do we use AI? How can we effectively use AI in mental health, right? For therapists, am I right to say that? Okay, pretty interesting question. Thanks to that prompt, so I can recall that memory. I also have the experience before whether we should use it in this area, and I tell you, it's a very difficult area to crack because there's a lot of psychology to think about this. Effectively, we have to understand what is the outcome of a therapist. We have to understand what is the job role of a therapist. Because in the end, we need to give that client a certain therapeutic or even positive outcome. And with that, right, if on a high level basis, you can try to codify what is their mental or thinking process of a therapist, right, you could eventually design a very good AI assistant for that. However, in reality, it's going to be incredibly challenging and very difficult. So that's why most people don't even dare to imagine automating so many of these experts away. However, what you can do, right, is to augment. And therefore, my personal belief, right, is that whatever AI solutions were introduced, whether therapies or other domains, right, or even healthcare, we should augment officers, augment experts, right, not replace them. Give them the tools that they need to do better, sharpen their thinking, enhance their comprehension, assist in their own expression, right? Give them things that they will do better. These are solutions that people will value the most. Once you do things that starts to take things away from people, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the trust factor is still not there yet. So there's a lot of areas we have to overcome. So do things that augment and not replace. That's my take. Yeah, thank you for that question.
All right, thanks for that. So one last question. I think this is also from the audience before we wrap up. Uh, what about skills, right? So you mentioned a few things that the AI product manager now has to do on top of the traditional PM work, right? So in terms of how you upskilled yourself or what skills are going to be needed to get more ready for this world, any sort of parting advice?
Yeah, just remember that experimentation is still very important from time to time. Uh, get into the weeds of, for example, prototyping things, vibe coding things. Uh, People used to say that you got to learn how to code and all these things, right? I'm not too sure about their opinion, but I feel that the best way to really understand and learn things is really try to build that POC yourself. Then you truly understand the opportunities and limitations. And from there, whatever emerging concepts that you hear from the media, from your TikToks or from whatever articles will eventually make a lot of sense to you. There's a lot of intuition from there. And if you don't remember whatever I said today, right? I have just one final piece of advice. In future, don't just think about upskilling in terms of how to do things, but also about how to think about things. Because where I'm driving at is the framework and thinking. And framework and thinking is so relevant when you design AI agents, when you orchestrate agents, and when you want to do things that help people improve themselves. So not just do things, but how to think things. Yeah.
All right, I think that's a good place to wrap. Thank you again, Ren Sen, for all the insights. Please help me thank Ren Sen.
Okay, thank you.